Imagine you are the most powerful man in the kingdom, a sultan, a caliph, surrounded by an army of loyal guards. You go to sleep in your most secure chamber, deep within your most fortified palace, and you wake up to find this on your pillow, a dagger, a warning. No one saw a thing, no one heard a sound. They could have killed you. They chose not to. They wanted you to know they could reach you anytime, anywhere. This wasn't just murder. This was a message. This was the calling card of the Hashashin, the order of assassins. And their story is far more terrifying and complex than any video game could ever capture.
To understand where these phantom killers came from, you have to understand their world, the late 11th century. The Middle East was a fractured and violent place. The great Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad was a shadow of its former self, a spiritual puppet for a new, formidable power, the Seljuk Turks. The Seljuks were military titans, staunch Sunni Muslims who had forged a vast empire across Persia and Anatolia. They were the new authority, enforcing a strict orthodox version of Islam. But not everyone bowed to their rule. Down in Egypt, their rivals, the Fatimid Caliphate, held power. The Fatimids were Shia Muslims, specifically from a branch known as Ismailism. To the Seljuks, they were heretics. To the Ismailis, the Seljuks were usurpers. It was a cold war of ideology, a powder keg of religious and political tension just waiting for a spark. And that spark was a man named Hassan-i Sabbah. Hassan-i Sabbah wasn't born a killer. He was born a scholar in the city of Qom in Persia. A brilliant and pious young man, he was raised in the mainstream Twelver Shia tradition. But he was restless, a seeker of deeper truths. He encountered Ismaili missionaries, and their message resonated with him. Their doctrine spoke of a hidden, esoteric meaning within the Quran, a truth accessible only through the guidance of a living, infallible imam descended from the Prophet Muhammad. For Hassan, this was a revelation. He converted, and his devotion was so absolute that he quickly rose through the ranks. He was sent to the heart of the Ismaili world, Cairo, the capital of the Fatimid Caliphate. He went seeking wisdom, but what he found was a political snake pit. The caliph was old and dying, and a vicious power struggle for his succession was underway. Hassan backed one son, Nizar, but Nizar's younger brother was placed on the throne through political maneuvering. Nizar was imprisoned and executed. Hassan, now on the losing side, was exiled. He returned to Persia not just as a missionary, but as a revolutionary. He believed the Ismaili leadership in Cairo had become corrupt. The true imam in his eyes was gone, hidden from the world. And in his absence, someone had to lead the fight, to prepare the way for his return. He decided that someone would be him.
Hassan knew he couldn't fight the massive Seljuk army on an open battlefield. He needed a base, an untouchable fortress from which he could wage a different kind of war. He found it in Alamut, the eagle's nest. Perched over 6,000 feet high in the remote Elburz mountains of northern Persia, Alamut was a natural stronghold, accessible by only one narrow, treacherous path. It was considered impregnable. But Hassan didn't take it with an army. He took it with his mind. For years, he sent his missionaries, his dais, into the region around the castle. They converted the local villagers. Then his followers began to infiltrate the fortress itself, taking jobs as guards and workers, quietly converting the garrison from within. By the time the Seljuk lord of the castle realized what was happening, it was too late. The majority of the people inside and outside the walls were loyal to Hassan. In 1090, Hassan-i Sabbah walked into Alamut Castle and took control without spilling a single drop of blood. The lord was given a fair price for his former property, and sent on his way. From this mountain throne, Hassan would defy the most powerful empire on earth for the next 35 years. He would never again leave its walls.
From Alamut, Hassan began to build his organization, the Nizari Ismailis. He created a hierarchy of followers with different levels of initiation and knowledge. At the very top were the Grand Masters like himself. Below them were the missionaries and teachers. And at the bottom, the tip of the spear, were the fidai, the devotees. These were the men who would become the living weapons of the order. These were the assassins. The training of a fidai was grueling. It was not just about combat. They were taught foreign languages, the customs and politics of foreign courts, and the intricate details of Sunni theology so they could blend in perfectly. They were spies, infiltrators, and agents of influence. But most importantly, they were subjected to intense psychological and spiritual indoctrination. They were taught that the Seljuk leaders were illegitimate tyrants who had corrupted the true faith. They were convinced that their mission was a sacred duty and that dying in its service guaranteed them a place in paradise. This absolute devotion, this willingness to sacrifice their own lives to achieve a goal, made them the most feared weapon of the medieval world. Now, we have to address the most famous legend about the assassins, a story told centuries later by the Venetian traveler Marco Polo. He wrote that the old man of the mountain would drug his young followers with hashish, lead them to a secret garden of paradise filled with wine and beautiful women, and convince them they had tasted heaven. He would then promise them a permanent return if they succeeded in their missions. It's a fantastic story, and it's almost certainly false. There is no contemporary evidence from any of their enemies, Seljuk, Crusader, or otherwise, that mentions this. The word Hashashin itself, from which we get assassin, was a derogatory term used by their enemies, meaning something like rabble or outcasts. The connection to hashish was a later smear. The reality is far more impressive. The Fidai's loyalty wasn't bought with drugs and illusions. It was forged through years of deep intellectual and spiritual conviction. Alamut wasn't a den of vice. It was a fortress of faith and a center of learning, boasting one of the finest libraries in the world.
Hassan's new state could not survive long without making a statement. He needed to show the Seljuk Empire that he was a force to be reckoned with. He chose his first target carefully, Nizam al-Mulk, the brilliant and powerful vizier of the Seljuk Sultan. He was the architect of the empire, the most powerful man behind the throne, and a staunch opponent of the Ismailis. In 1092, a Fidaili disguised as a Sufi mystic approached the vizier's litter. He got close, and then, in a flash, plunged a dagger into the old man's heart. The assassination sent shockwaves across the Muslim world. This wasn't a random act of violence. It was a precise political statement. The Nizaris had eliminated the brain of the Seljuk state. It was the opening move in a new kind of war, a war fought not with armies, but with daggers in the dark.
And this is where you see the genius of Hassan-i Sabbah's strategy. He called it Dawa Jadida, the new preaching. He understood asymmetrical warfare better than anyone of his time. Why raise an army you can't afford to fight a battle you can't win against an empire that can replace its soldiers endlessly? It's far more efficient to remove the one person who matters, a general, a vizier, a caliph. By killing a key figure, you could destabilize an entire kingdom, halt an invasion, or sow discord among your enemies. The Fidai rarely tried to escape. They often carried out their missions in public, in mosques or crowded courts, to maximize the psychological impact. The message was clear: no one is safe. Your guards cannot protect you. Your walls cannot hide you. This calculated use of terror was their primary weapon.
Alamut was just the beginning. Following the success of Nizam al-Mulk's assassination, the Seljuks sent army after army to try and crush the eagle's nest. They all failed. The fortress was too strong, the defenders too determined. While the Seljuk armies were breaking themselves against the rocks of Alamut, Hassan's agents were busy. They replicated the Alamut strategy across the region, seizing a network of castles and strongholds throughout Persia and, crucially, expanding west into Syria. This created a scattered, decentralized state of Nizari enclaves. They didn't control large swaths of contiguous territory, but they didn't need to. They had a web of unassailable bases from which they could project their power and influence far beyond their numbers.
It was in Syria that the Nizaris came into direct contact with a new power in the region, the European Crusaders. And it was here that the legend of the Old Man of the Mountain was born. The leader of the Syrian branch in the late 12th century was a man named Rashid ad-Din Sinan. To the Crusaders, he was the embodiment of the order's mystique and terror. Sinan was a master strategist and diplomat, even more pragmatic than his predecessors in Persia. He operated with a great deal of autonomy from Alamut, playing the complex political game of the Crusader states. He would form alliances with one Christian lord against another, or with a Muslim emir against the Crusaders. His goal was singular, the survival and prosperity of the Syrian Nizaris. He was a king-maker and a king-breaker, and his daggers were the most feared currency in the politics of the Holy Land.
Perhaps no story illustrates the assassins' methods better than their interactions with the great Sultan Saladin. Saladin, the unifier of the Muslim forces against the Crusaders, saw the Syrian Nizaris as a dangerous threat. He besieged one of their castles, Masyaf. The siege was going well, and then, one night, Saladin woke up in his tent. Pinned to his pillow by a dagger was a note. It contained a threat, warning him that he did not withdraw. He would be the next target. Next to the note were cakes of a specific type, baked only within the Nizari fortress. The message was unmistakable. Saladin's most elite bodyguards had been bypassed. The most secure location in his entire army had been breached. He could have been killed as he slept. Saladin understood. He lifted the siege and negotiated a truce with Sinan. Fear had accomplished what an army could not.
The Crusaders were not immune. They both feared and, at times, even employed the assassins. But they could also become targets. In 1192, Conrad of Montferrat, the newly elected king of Jerusalem, was walking down a street in the city of Tyre. He was ambushed by two fidei disguised as Christian monks. They stabbed him to death in broad daylight. The assassination was a major political event. Suspicion fell on everyone, including Conrad's rival, King Richard the Lionheart of England. But most historians believe the order came from Sinan. The motive remains debated to this day. Perhaps Conrad had betrayed a deal, or perhaps Sinan was hired by one of Conrad's enemies. Whatever the reason, it proved that not even a Crusader king was safe from the reach of the Old Man of the Mountain. While their reputation was built on daggers, life within the Nizari fortresses, especially Alamut, was intensely intellectual. Hassan-i Sabbah and his successors were not just warlords, they were patrons of science and philosophy. Alamut's library became a legendary repository of knowledge, attracting scholars from all over the world. They collected texts on everything from medicine and alchemy to astronomy and mathematics. They were not just preserving knowledge, they were creating it. In an age of strict religious orthodoxy, the Nizari castles became havens for free thinking and intellectual exploration. This is the great paradox of the assassins.
The same group that perfected the art of political murder also fostered a vibrant culture of scholarship that was among the most advanced of its time. Decades after Hassan's death, the Nizaris underwent a radical theological transformation. In 1164, the fourth ruler of Alamut, Hassan II, gathered his followers and made a shocking declaration. He announced the Qiyamah, or the Great Resurrection. He proclaimed that the era of Sharia, of Islamic law and ritual, was over. The hidden, esoteric truth of religion was now manifest, and followers could experience paradise spiritually in this life. He also effectively claimed that he was the hidden imam, revealed to his people. This was a seismic event for the community. It placed them even further outside the bounds of mainstream Islam and reinforced their identity as a unique community with a special destiny. For their followers, it was a moment of spiritual liberation. For their enemies, it was the ultimate proof of their heresy. For nearly 2 centuries, the Nizari state had survived. They had outlasted Seljuk sultans, frustrated Crusader kings, and defied caliphs. They seemed invincible in their mountain strongholds. But in the 13th century, a new force emerged from the east, a force against which daggers and fortresses were useless: the Mongols. Under Genghis Khan and his successors, the Mongol Empire became the largest contiguous land empire in history. They were a force of nature, an unstoppable storm of conquest that swept across Asia and into the Middle East. And they had a simple policy for anyone who resisted: total annihilation. The grandson of Genghis Khan, Hulagu Khan, was given a mission: to conquer Persia and the lands beyond, all the way to Egypt. The Nizari Ismailis were on his list. The Mongols had their own reasons to hate the assassins. There were reports the Nizaris had sent a team of 40 fidai to try and assassinate the great Khan in Mongolia. The mission failed, but it sealed their fate. Hulagu arrived in Persia with a massive army, equipped with the most advanced siege technology of the day, likely learned from Chinese engineers. They had powerful trebuchets that could hurl enormous boulders and a brutal, systematic approach to siege warfare. The game had changed. The assassins' mountain strongholds were about to face their greatest test. In 1256, Hulagu's army laid siege to Alamut. The final Nizari Imam, Rukn al-Din Qur-Shah, was a young and inexperienced leader. He was no Hassan-i Sabbah. He faced an impossible choice. The fortress of Alamut was still formidable, with vast stores of food and water, potentially able to hold out for years. But Hulagu had encircled it completely. There was no hope of relief. The Mongols began a relentless bombardment. Day after day, massive rocks crashed against the fortress walls. While the core castle of Alamut itself was nearly untouchable, the surrounding fortifications began to crumble. Qur-Shah, perhaps hoping to save his people from a massacre, entered into negotiations with Hulagu.
Hulagu promised Qur-Shah his life if he would surrender and order all the other Nizari castles to do the same. It was a terrible gamble. Qur-Shah agreed. He descended from Alamut and surrendered to the Khan. He then sent messengers to the nearly 100 other Nizari strongholds, ordering them to lay down their arms. Some obeyed. Others, defiant to the last, refused and were slaughtered. Qur-Shah had hoped for mercy. He received none. After he had served his purpose, he and his entire family were executed. The age of the Nizari state was over.
The Mongols were not content with just military victory. They wanted to erase the Nizaris from history. They entered Alamut and began a systematic campaign of destruction. But their greatest target was not the fortifications, it was the library. The vast collection of scientific, philosophical, and theological knowledge that the Nizaris had gathered for over 150 years was put to the torch. Almost the entire literary output of the Nizari state, their histories, their doctrines, their discoveries, was lost forever in the flames. A Persian scholar in Hulagu's court, Atta Malik Juvaini, was allowed to save a few texts before the rest were destroyed. It is largely thanks to him that we know anything at all about the Nizaris from their own perspective. The Mongols were trying to kill not just a people, but an idea.
But an idea is harder to kill than a person. Though their state was destroyed and their castles dismantled, the Nizari Ismaili people and their faith survived. They went deep underground, scattering into small clandestine communities across Persia, Central Asia, and India. For centuries, they practiced their faith in secret, led by a line of hidden imams. They endured persecution and hardship, but they preserved their traditions and their identity. The story of the assassins did not end with the fall of Alamut. It simply entered a new, quieter chapter. The descendants of this community exist to this day, led by their living imam, the Aga Khan, and are known for their focus on education, philanthropy, and humanitarian work, a legacy far removed from the dagger and the myth. So how did this complex story of a religious minority fighting for survival become the legend of drug-crazed superhuman killers? The myth was a combination of Marco Polo's fantastical tales and centuries of propaganda from their enemies. This black legend was then picked up by Western writers in the 19th century and cemented in the popular imagination. And of course, in the 21st century, it was spectacularly reborn in the Assassin's Creed video games. The games borrow many elements from the real history: the fortress of Masyaf, Rashid ad-Din Sinan, the conflict with the Templars, but they weave it into a fictional thousand-year conspiracy. The real Nizaris weren't fighting a secret war for free will against a shadowy cabal. They were fighting a very real, very desperate war for their own survival in a hostile world. Their creed was not "nothing is true, everything is permitted." Their creed was faith, and their method was fear.
The true legacy of the Order of Assassins is not one of fantasy. It is a stark lesson in power, faith, and survival. They demonstrated how a small, determined group with no army and no kingdom could hold empires at bay. They perfected the art of psychological warfare, understanding that the fear of the dagger was often more powerful than the dagger itself. They were not mindless fanatics, but a complex society of scholars, theologians, and dedicated soldiers who built a state and a culture against impossible odds. They were a product of their violent times, and they used violence with surgical precision to achieve their political goals. They proved that history is often shaped not by the largest army, but by the most committed and disciplined mind. The dagger on the pillow was a symbol. It meant that ideas, when backed by absolute conviction, can be sharper and more dangerous than any sword. The story of the assassins is a reminder that the truth of history is often buried beneath the myths created by their enemies and the fantasies created by our own time. What part of their real story did you find the most surprising? Was it the library of Alamut, their clash with Saladin, or the way their empire finally fell? Let me know in the comments below.